Welcome to your Monday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand, a show today that is dramatically different than the one I had planned as of Sunday night right before 10 p.m. But then we got word Ryan Saunders fired as head coach of the Timberwolves. We're going to talk about that pretty much exclusively today. I know other things happened this weekend, but that is the biggest news of the weekend in Minnesota sports. I'll be joined in a little bit by Star Tribune columnist Patrick Reusse to help me sort through all this. But first, I've got some thoughts of my own, I guess, as we process the Ryan Saunders firing and the Chris Finch hiring. An interesting kind of set of dynamics in play there. Right off the bat, not terribly surprising, if we're being honest, right? I like Ryan Saunders. He's a good person. I think some tweets about him, supporting him, made that very clear. From all parts of basketball, but underperformance on the court will do you in every time. And bottom line is Ryan Saunders, 43-94 since taking over as head coach of the Wolves, about halfway through the 2018-2019 season, including 7-24 this season. I think they were getting better to a degree this year. Part of the problem here is when they looked hopeless earlier this year, I think that reveals something about coaching, right? When you can't even muster a competitive, you can't even be competitive in the game. That tells you a little bit about coaching, right? Unfortunately, because it means A, you're missing one of your best players, Karl Anthony Towns, for a lot of that stretch, but B, that you can't devise a way to use the parts you have to stay in the game. Lately, it's been better, right? They've been competitive. They've had this string, double digits now, of games in the single digits, where the margin is close. Had another game like that Sunday, in which they lost to the Knicks, and as irony would have it, coached by Tom Thibodeau. Maybe that's the last straw, because obviously Ryan Saunders takes over for Tom Thibodeau in the season in which he took over as interim head coach. So interesting dynamic there, but the bottom line is they've been losing a lot of these close games, and when you lose a lot of close games, I think that reveals even more about a coach, that you can't squeeze those last two or three plays out of the team you need. You can't. The coaching becomes extra crucial when you feel like a team is very close to winning a lot of games that they are losing instead. Now, maybe the timing of it was a little surprising. They were at home just a little while ago. They'd been, they lost to Toronto at home on Friday. Why wait till they go on the road to New York before you do this? And the hiring of Chris Finch certainly qualifies as a surprise. You had David Vanterpool on your staff right now. He's the associate head coach, a coach who, as a defensive coordinator of sorts, maybe you look at that and you say the defense has underachieved largely during Vanterpool's tenure last year and this year. 23rd in defensive rating this season, but 10th in this kind of recent stretch of better play. So you look at that and say, I assumed, at least when I found out that Saunders had been fired, that Vanterpool was the guy, that they was going to promote him, play out the season, kind of give him an audition, with these last 40, 50 games in this shortened season to see what he could do. Instead, they go hire Chris Finch, assistant from Toronto, current assistant from Toronto. We'll get to that in a moment, but you don't need me to wonder about passing over David Vanterpool. A much more qualified person can do that. Damian Lillard, who played under David Vanterpool in Portland for several seasons, tweeted, quote, "How the hell do you not hire David Vanterpool, and he's right there on the bench and has been in the front office successfully and on the front of a bench of a winning team successfully, parentheses 7 years, and also has played a major role in the development of a dominant backcourt, SMDH." That's a good question. This is a surprise. It's less of a surprise when you consider the history of Chris Finch, how he coached in Rio Grande when Gerson Rosas, Timberwolves president, was with Houston. Rio Grande was the G League affiliate of the Rockets. He was later promoted to the Rockets bench. From everything we understand, Rosas has had an eye on Finch for a while. I believe Chris Hine, our Star Tribune Timberwolves beat writer, has mentioned this to me both on the Timberwolves podcast previously and on just in conversation that, hey, if something ever were to happen, this is a name you need to keep in mind. This is someone that's kind of been front brain for Reusse since the beginning. Why not hire him right away at the jump at the start of the 2019-2020 season before they made Ryan Saunders the permanent head coach, not just interim? That's a good question. That does make you wonder kind of what the chain of command is with that hire, and whether Reusse was kind of waiting for the moment to bring his guy in. But his guy is in now mid-season. A tweet from at JG Average Runner says, "When is the last time something like this has happened in any sport? 1. Mid-season firing. 2. Announce a new hiring in the hour. 3. It's an assistant coach from another team. This all seems very strange." I will agree. That sounds very strange to me, too. Hopefully we'll be able to sort this all out in the coming days. I'd love to get Chris Hine back on the show, once the dust settles a little bit, once we've had some introductory news conferences, once we have a little bit more information and not just raw reaction to all this. But, it'll be that's interesting. I can't remember this ever happening where you just hire someone from someone else's staff. He's working on Toronto's staff up until, a day ago. I had funny thing, I had Teresa Resch, Raptors executive, on the show a few days ago before the Wolves played the Raptors. Didn't think of asking her if the Wolves were about to hire a Raptors assistant coach because that's never happened before. But just some strange symmetry in all that. But yeah, Chris Finch said to be an offensive-minded head coach. They can certainly use that if they are going to build an identity on this team. The players that they have invested in the most heavily, at least with money so far, are Karl-Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, and Malik Beasley. They are offensive-minded players, not defensive-minded players. So you probably should have a coach who caters to that. But you got to figure it takes a while to implement the system. You're doing it on the fly this year, so that part of it is very strange. Last thing I want to get to before I bring in Patrick Reusse, it sure feels like this puts it all on Reusse now, doesn't it? Before he kind of had some cover of, I don't have my guys, we're still working through this, haven't necessarily been able to hire exactly the coach of the future yet, even if he, publicly was in Ryan Saunders' corner and wanted Ryan Saunders to succeed. Well, he's definitely got his coach now. Chris Finch is in. A lot of eyes now turn to Gerson Rosas. You've made all of these moves. You've installed your system. Now you have this new coach. What's going to happen? Because they've underachieved this year. I think more of it has to do with the product on the court so far, not the personnel. I think he's made some good moves, especially around the fringes of that roster, to bring in good, second-round picks, undrafted free agents like Jordan McLaughlin and Naz Reid. He's hit on some of the fringe guys. Looks like Jaden McDaniels, their late first-round pick from this past year. He's got a real future, but evaluating this roster will become a lot easier now, and that evaluation includes, in large part, Gerson Rosas, and can they get this thing turned around? Because 7-24 is an underachievement in every stretch of the imagination.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to be joined right now by Patrick Reusse, Star Tribune columnist. He's seen pretty much every Timberwolves coach there is to see, and now we'll see another one, Chris Finch. Patrick, welcome to Daily Delivery, first time appearance, and right off the bat, I just got to ask you your reaction to the Ryan Saunders firing and the Chris Finch hiring.
Well, my reaction to it is that I watched the game last night, and then just said, well, that's Tibbs might be playing more old-fashioned ball than he did here. It was amazing. And then then my wife and I watched a BBC, 2 episodes of a BBC series. And then I got a text from my son in Hawaii saying they fired Saunders.
Yeah.
I said, what? I didn't know. I hadn't. So I wasn't on top of it when the news broke, but it's extremely odd, Mike, firing that took place after the game like this? Why didn't it, I mean, obviously they knew they were going to do it all last week.
Sure.
Why did he go on the road trip? Why didn't they tell him to stay home Saturday morning and fire him here and do it in a little higher class style, in my opinion? And then, if you didn't have your deal complete with Finch yet, let Vanderpool coach him or something. But
right.
Putting Ryan on the plane and flying him out there and calling him in there, however they did it.
That's a good point on the timing of it. It's no weirder than firing Thibs a couple of years ago after 2 blowout wins. But,
yes, right. Yeah.
Remember that?
Tibbs couldn't get along with people. That was his main problem. But it was, I mean, we all knew that he wasn't going to be back next year. But it's something that was going to happen. That Ryan, there was very little chance he was going to be back next year. It was a weird hire in the first place when they gave him the job, because 32-year-old kid without that much coaching experience. You look at him, if what you saw last night from Cat when he wanted to beat Tibbs is how he intends to play 75% of his games. If he could play 75% of his games, then they got some potential here. If he's going to coast through half of them like he normally does, then I think they're in trouble. So I think it's all depending on him. If he wants to be a great player, or if he wants to shoot, if he wants to get in and mix it up and get rebounds and block some shots like he did last night in the fourth quarter, then they got some hope here. And if he doesn't become he thinks he's a superstar, but he's far from that. And I think that's what they need more than anything, is him to develop some kind of a consistency that he hasn't shown us. Cat, to me, was we all saw great potential. He played every game. He when he the first couple of years, wow, this is going to be something. And I think, to me, I've been disappointed. Beyond the injuries, beyond not playing all the time, I've just been disappointed by the degree of effort that we see from him most nights. I suppose it's easy to get down when you're getting beat so often. But if he could be the player he was in the fourth quarter last night, 2/3 of the time, then there's something that can happen here. But Edwards has got a tremendous athletic ability. Is he going to become? He's shooting 37% or something right now, and could he be a 45% shooter, a 44% shooter? That's going to decide whether he can be a star. This McDaniels certainly looks like he has some potential. But, Mike, I don't know about you, but I'm not a D'Angelo Russell guy. I don't think that he brings much. He's, he can get hot and win a couple of games for you, but he couldn't guard me, or
no,
he wouldn't want to. I lost a lot of hope for him last year when I came back from spring training and went to a game against Orlando. And Markelle Fultz, one of the great flops in the history of number one draft choices, was driving by him and shooting layups just as often as he wanted to. So I don't know about him either. But we'll see what this new guy, Chris Finch, can do with him. He's supposed to be an offensive genius, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think the thing I'm glad you mentioned Russell. I'm cooling on that. I liked the idea of trading Wiggins. I like the idea of, this is the guy they've wanted to get. This is the guy that Reusse has been after for a while, and they were able to, kind of do the get rid of Wiggins in one fell swoop. Now, the problem is they're also out a draft pick, and it could be a pretty high one this season if it conveys, and it still could be a high one next season. But the larger point with that is, I think this series of moves now puts a lot of eyes on Reusse, right? If Saunders wasn't his, handpicked coach, even if he was the coach that Reusse initially, hired, he inherited him, but he made him the permanent head coach. Then now he's definitely got his guy. He's got his system. He's made a lot of trades to make this roster what he wants it to be. I wouldn't say it's a complete, I don't say the roster's complete, but it's at least the way they want to play, they have the players they want to play now. This puts a lot of it on Reusse right now, don't you think, to deliver on his vision?
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt about that. What's interesting to me is you mentioned the draft choice. If they don't end up picking 1, 2, or 3, and a lot of that depends upon what the ping pong balls are, because right now they have the worst record in the league. But if indeed, to me, your commitment for the rest of this season should be keeping your draft choice, right?
It's hard because you only have a 40% chance of keeping it, even if you have the worst pick. So the odds are stacked against you, even if you're the worst.
Do you think the benefit of having Finch outweighs the fact that you could just keep playing rotten and losing? you can increase your odds. What if they end up winning some games here, end up playing 500 the rest of the way? Doesn't that, that's probably gonna, maybe it doesn't reduce the odds that much. I don't know, but I think the best thing they can accomplish over the last 25 games of this season is to not give up that draft choice.
I think what Gerson's terrified of is that, that they finish really bad. They don't get a top 3 pick because statistically they're not supposed to, and then it ends up being like the number 4 or number 5 pick, which is the most likely thing. So I think he'd like to win some games and have the pick convey and be like a number 8 or number 9 pick instead of I don't know. If I'm just inside his head, I think it's more embarrassing if you end up giving up a top 5 pick than if you play better and then reduce your lottery odds this season. But they're going to give up the pick one way or another. It's either this year or next year. So, maybe they feel like they've got enough young players right now. Let's try to win now. And the other thing with that is the clock is ticking, right? On not only on Gerson's tenure, but on Karl Anthony Towns, right? You mentioned Towns and all the losing. Like you can't just have lost season after lost season. To a certain point, you've got to win. So maybe they try to jumpstart that now. But I'm surprised that Vanterpool wasn't given at least the interim tag right now, because it sure seems like he was the head coach in waiting all along until he wasn't.
Yeah, Damian Lillard, did you see he felt obliged to go on Twitter and rip the Timberwolves for not giving Vanderpool a chance at the job? And
I read that tweet earlier in the show. Yeah, it was quite something.
And let's just point out for anybody here that Vanderpool is black and Chris Finch is a 51-year-old white guy. The NBA, I think, has 7 out of their 30 coaches are African American, and 60-some% of their rosters are African American. It's kind of the same, are black. Same problem the NFL has. I mean, the NFL has a little higher. It had 70-some% black players and 2 coaches now. So
I know.
I mean, it's out there, and I'm sure that they all thought they saw Vanderpool sitting on the bench next to a guy they knew was going to get fired and thought he was going to get the job. But so anyway, Finch is an interesting story though, man. He's, he made his bones at Franklin and Marshall College, where they went to the Division III finals and lost. And then he ended up over in Europe. He played for the Sheffield Forgers. They were the Sheffield Forgers. I think it's a steel town. I don't think they were talking about forging checks and stuff like that. And then they became the Sheffield Sharks, and he started coaching them in the British Basketball League. And then he stayed over in Europe, and he coached around Europe for quite a while. And then he got back over here and got some assistant's job. Why did he travel around so much as an assistant? He had 3 years in Houston. I guess it was other coaches being fired and bringing in their own staff. So, but he was only in New Orleans for 1 year. He's only in Toronto for
2 months.
2 months. So it's and he was given credit for saying they had increased the offensive efficiency of Toronto. But all I know is last year Toronto was without Kawhi, trying to repeat their championship. They were almost the surprise success of the NBA last year, and this year they're not playing nearly as well. They got guys hurt. Kyle Lowry's not playing,
right?
But I don't know. I look at the offensive efficiency is improved. Okay, well, you're losing, so what difference does it make? But anyway. It is too bad that this happened last night, because we could have talked about Tibbs ball a little more.
Well, yeah, that was the original premise of all this, was that we were going to talk about that. But it does, it does add some nice symmetry to all this, though. Obviously, didn't get fired because he lost to Thibs, but it was a little over 2 years ago that this whole kind of merry-go-round started when they fired Thibs. And the thing you forget about that season is, I believe, post Butler trade, the Wolves were like 15-12 under Thibs. They were starting to play a little bit better. But yeah, he couldn't get along with anybody. You can say too, like that team as it was constructed wasn't really going to go anywhere. Maybe it was going to be, they would have had more wins, I think, certainly at this point, if Thibs was still coaching the team and had played out the contract, because this would have been the last year of his contract, would it not have been? This would have been year 5 of the 5-year deal.
No, but I don't think the 5th year was guaranteed.
Okay.
So I think they paid him off last year. I think he got $14 million when he left.
Okay.
So, or that was it. I know he kept his condo here until October of that year because he had this expensive condo with a lease. So he just hung around here.
That's right.
Kind of like a coach, kind of cheap, but odd character. I know him pretty well. He goes back to He's Bill Musselman all over again, except without as much personality. But the same driven idea to win tonight's game.
Yeah.
And that even back when Bill was doing it in the first 2 years of the Timberwolves, it wasn't such an outlier as it is now, because the way the NBA has gotten in the last 10 years, the last 12 years since LeBron put together the All-Star team in Miami, here's the difference, Mike. In the NHL, if you make the playoffs, you got a chance, right? In the MLB, if you make the playoffs, unless you're the Twins, you have a chance. You got a chance. The Twins aren't going to win a playoff game. We know that, so we enjoy the regular season. If you make the NFL in the playoffs, if you make the playoffs, everybody's excited and you got a chance. In the NBA, making the playoff, you don't have a chance. No. If you're, Toronto sneaked in and won it, I think is a 4 seed or something the other, but you don't have a chance. You finished 6th, 7th, 8th, now 9th or 10th. Okay, good. You win a playoff here. You don't have a chance. You're not gonna get to the conference finals if you're not one of the 3 best teams in your conference. So making the playoffs is, you want a coach who's, in the modern times, most of the guys, want to get. It becomes, how many ping pong balls can we get? Can we get this great player who's in the top 4 or 5? And when you're in Minnesota, you're never going to have an all-star team you're never going to have Cat say, boy, I'm staying here and I'm going to get 2 of my buddies and we're going to come in and freeze our arses off in Minnesota and in an old arena. And where they don't really care that much about the NBA, but we're going to put together an all-star team and win here. It's a really difficult situation, and the league is, the league does well. It still gets a lot of conversation when stuff like this happens, but it's too dang top heavy, and it's just. And now a guy like Cat, we can worry about a guy like Cat. Oh, is he going to stay? Is he going to stay? Yeah. Well, do something to make me care if you stay or not. Okay. Yeah. It's got to be more than you've done so far. You've got to do more than you've done so far for me to say, boy, we got to give all our efforts to keeping him around, because he has proven, well, now being hurt so much, who knows, but he's proven that he's not going to take you any place if he plays like he's played the last 3 years. So
yeah, I don't think they can be the team they want to be if he's your first option. I've come to that conclusion. I think a lot of people have too. I think, gifted offensive player, but you need someone a rung above him if you're going to be, a real threat. And maybe that becomes Edwards. I don't know, but it's not. I don't think it's Cat.
You know what they should have him do at the All-Star game? He's not going to make the team, but have him do shoot the 3, get the 3-point contest. Yeah. He's fabulous. He's a fabulous 3-point shooter. Beautiful stroke, quick trigger. If he wasn't 7'1", we'd say, oh man, aren't we lucky to have him playing on the wing? But he was. Didn't you think last night he was inside mixing it up more than he's been in a long time?
Yeah, he was. Some of that's, you're right. He's, finally getting back into maybe a little bit more playing shape. But you're right. It goes beyond this season. It goes back a few years even. And part of it I think is the style. They've got him playing outside a lot. They've got kind of that the outside in offense, the motion, and we'll see what Finch wants to do with him, and what Reusse wants. But yeah, some of that takes him away from the basket, where I think he's actually pretty good in there when he's been put in those situations to mix it up and get those rebounds. So
I don't know what is interesting about him, Mike, is allegedly he was not a Thibodeau fan. Well, they played 209 games with Thibodeau as coach. He played them all.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
He's 209 out of 209. Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, he showed up and he played. The other great thing about the whole trade and the whole change is I ran into a headline the other day about what a great defensive player Andrew Wiggins has become.
Yeah.
And what a great complimentary player. Isn't it amazing how the teams, how people could look when when everybody's not saying he's got to be the guy.
Yeah.
And the expectations are when you have low expectations, they are much easier to achieve. No kidding. Yeah. So that's what you have in Wiggins. They like Wiggins better than we like Russell right now.
I think that's 100% accurate. Well, we'll see if Russell can get back in the court, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. We'll see, we'll see what happens the rest of this season, but it feels like, kind of this perpetual rebuild is heading into a new phase with a new coach, and plenty to watch. What they play a couple games right off the bat here. I think they get Milwaukee and is it Chicago, right? In the next 2 games, there'll be plenty of chances for offense against Chicago. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But surprising news. I think not the Saunders firing, but the Finch hiring, and a lot of eyes now on Reusse and Cat, like we talked about. Patrick, great stuff. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on the Daily Delivery podcast, and we'll do this again. Maybe next time there won't be breaking news, and we can just talk what we were going to talk about.
All right, sir.
Take care.
All right, Mike. Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye. Loved having Patrick on to help me break that all down. I want to run through a few of your questions, and then we'll get out of here. These are all from Twitter. @Jackson Purdy says, I don't understand the firing at all. First year he takes over mid-season. Last year a system is installed for a bunch of players who can't play in it, and then the whole roster is overhauled. Now the year Cat has missed a bunch of games and D'Lo has missed the ones that Cat has played. And I think that's valid. I think that's the one thing where you can say this is odd that maybe Ryan Saunders didn't get, even if he got 140-ish games to prove himself, none of it was with exactly the roster you would imagine. And could you get a full evaluation of him during that time? @Snortwood has the exact opposite reaction. It's about time. Any team that can only play well when they're down and desperate late is either not properly motivated or it's taking the coaching staff too long to figure it out and adjust in-game. Either way, that's on the head coach. Fresh start. I'm all for it. Yeah, I get that too. I think that's a pretty fair assessment of kind of what you were seeing on the court in particular. Some wasted possessions, not being able to get things done in the moments that it mattered most, or earlier in the season, having games that were completely lost, feeling, midway through the second quarter, you felt like they didn't have a chance to win the game. So I think that's the harshest criticism and fairest criticism of what we saw on the court, that they just didn't seem like they were properly motivated sometimes, and they didn't seem like they were properly executing in those key moments. @MyFanSanity wants to know, did Reusse want Finch from the start and bent to Glenn and Cat on hiring Ryan? I don't think we'll ever know the full answer to that question, but it is interesting that Finch was someone who interviewed a couple years ago who Reusse has liked for a long time, and that they were able to make this move in season to take him away from Toronto. Obviously, those dialogues have continued. Obviously, Gerson Rosas has continued to admire the work that Chris Finch does. I'm not going to say this is like some kind of nefarious deal going on here, but it does feel like there was stuff going on behind the scenes, and that Rosas was still, enamored with the idea of getting Finch in here at some point. Last one from @Joe Nels. Who knew about this before it happened? Cat's post-game quote sounded like he was giving his blessing for the team to move on. how much control does Reusse have over the lineups? If it's a lot, why will Finch be any different? I don't think Reusse has control over the starting lineups or exactly who plays. It's very clear, though, that there's a style that he wants them to play. He's largely trying to acquire a roster to play that style, although I don't understand why they don't have a few more better three-point shooters if that's what they want to do so much. But I think that the last question is a good one to leave on. If it's a lot, if Reusse still has a lot of control, why will Finch be any different? Well, it's a different voice. It's someone who probably syncs up with Rousse's vision a little bit more, uniformly, being that they both were in Houston together. They know each other. They know kind of the style they want to play. So that's what I could say to that question, that if Finch is fully bought into Rousse's system, which I would hope he would, and I hope Reusse knows exactly what he's getting in Finch, then that's the upside to this. If they can all get this on the same page, then maybe they can get something going and turn this season around to a degree and turn the next one around as well. That will do it today for the Daily Delivery podcast. Obviously, a full 30 on the Ryan Saunders firing, the Chris Finch hiring. I imagine this will be a topic of discussion for a portion of the rest of the week and bits and pieces as well. Like I said, I'll probably have Chris Hine on, Timberwolves beat writer, at some point here as we kind of sort things through, maybe see Chris Finch in action for a game or two and go from there. Always read our stuff, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Subscribe to this podcast. Thank you for listening today to the Daily Delivery podcast.